serve as the discussant and interrogator today of our very esteemed panel. What I think the format that we are planning to use today is to have our keynote speaker go ahead and present his opening lecture, Mr. David Ofosu-Dorte, who is the senior partner of AB and David Africa. The firm is registered in Mauritius and has offices in Ghana, Zambia, Botswana, Zimbabwe, and Uganda, with affiliate firms in several other markets around the globe. And so Mr. David will go ahead and present his talk for about 20 minutes. And then what we're going to do is have more of a conversation. We'll have a question and answer, a period really revolving around the key theme of our panel today, which is law practice in the time of the African Continental Free Trade Area, reimagining African lawyers. This is an area that I myself have been very interested in for almost the last 10 years. And so being here back in Nigeria is quite an honor. I'm very, very delighted to be able to chair this. And I think what I'll do now is I'll turn it over to Mr. David for him to give his prepared remarks. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. I have 20 minutes, and I actually loaded the presentation much earlier and asked for the remote so that I need to control the remote myself. It's easier. Otherwise, it's going to get confused. Just move to the next slide if you don't have it. Just please just move to the third slide. Keep on going until your remote works. So we're dealing with law in the time of Continental Free Trade Agreement, reimagining the African lawyer, and there are a few thoughts I'm sharing in order to set the stage. Let's move on. So first, we have to ask ourselves what's up. And by what's up, I'm asking what is happening even before the Continental Free Trade Agreement, because we keep talking about the CFTA. But the truth about the CFTA is that it's targeted to commence in 2022 to 2063, by which time we are supposed to reach the intra-African trade moving from the current 13% to 60%. So what is happening already is quite important, and it may affect what happens over the period. So let's see some of the things which are already happening. Can I see the next slide? What is happening is that there are already a number of disruptive events, and these disruptive events have not necessarily been waiting for the CFTA. They have been happening. We live in a digital world, and everything is getting, very digital. The national law firms have been entering Africa for a few years already. There is also the rise of other activities. For example, no, please stay on that slide. There is the rise of what is called Africa practice among international law firms, and you will find that many practitioners based in Europe and the US call themselves or have a practice called Africa practice. At the last check on my database, I compared a list of 22,000 lawyers who call themselves Africa practice lawyers, not based in Africa. So that's part of the disruption that is already happening. Then you have what I would call the China-India struggle. The China-India struggle is a struggle of international law firms who try to enter the very fast-growing Indian and China market. India essentially tried as much as possible to block it. There were various ways that firms tried to go around it. It hasn't worked that very much. During the discussion time, I'm sure we will talk about a few of them. But China is often misrepresented. Big market growing, and almost all the big firms are represented there. But the truth is that the China market is not as lucrative as it may appear. The only reason why most of them are there is that you cannot afford not to be in China. And again, I can elaborate on this when it comes to the discussion time. And then you have the lessons that we have to learn from what I call the Brussels versus Paris experience. What I mean by the Brussels experience is that you have the European Union having its own free trade agreement similar to what we are trying to achieve. And Brussels became a point where most people who are trying to practice European law are concentrated. So you find that some firms based in UK have as many as 200 to 300 people based in Brussels alone, trying to unbundle the complexity of European law. But then, if you come to Africa, trying to create a situation where a number of states can practice commercial principles together is not new. We have the OHADA regime in the Francophone countries. What has happened in the Francophone countries is that the OHADA regime appear, and I say appear, I don't have the data yet, but I have every reason to believe that based on my interaction with a lot of Francophone lawyers, as well as law firms based in Paris, it will appear that law firms based in Paris have gotten more out of OHADA than African-based law firms. So you will find that firms like Gilles Lauriette and the rest have a significant component in Africa practice. Can we have the next slide? So these disruptions continue. You have all the talk about the fastest growing economies being in Africa, growing middle class, increasing capital flows, etc. One significant one is the inflow of trade from China. So you find that China's trade with Africa has grown from what used to be 2010 as low as $11 billion per annum to $339 billion by 2016. Significant growth in just less than a decade. Now, the question that we must ask, and can you go to the next slide, is who is getting this mega box? I will deal with that as we go along. But the other disruptive event happening is technology, blockchains, cloud computing. All these things are happening and affecting law practice. Those of you who have read Richard Susskind and other persons who predict the future, a day will come where if you are not digital in the digital world, you just can't practice law. And just before I move from that topic, it is a fact that today you have the Coin software, which is artificial intelligence software, which is reviewing contracts, and Coin reviews 500 contracts in 10 seconds. It started with 36 seconds. It did the AI learning. Now it does it in 10 seconds. That 10 seconds, by my estimates, if you compute it at the lowest review hour of a lawyer in US, which is $200, the lowest, that's the lowest you can get, took off about $75 million from the briefs of lawyers, because you are talking about 362,000 hours, which was written off. So these things are happening. Next slide, please. What are the growth areas which are also impacting on before even CFTA? Growth in infrastructure. It is said that we need $92 billion per annum in Africa to fill the infrastructure gap. Of the $92 billion, the interesting statistics is that Nigeria alone requires $36 billion per annum to fill the infrastructure gap. Now that's about a third or so of that amount of money. So the potential spend here and this impact on law practice is very, very massive. But if you look at this, pause, power, etc., then you find that $29 billion have been spent on infrastructure in Africa already over the last 3 years. Of that, UK firms by 2013 made 2.3 billion pounds from Africa. All the rest of Africa put together, aside the big 3 South African firms, did not make that money. So again, just to illustrate what is happening already, who gets the mega bucks? Next slide. Now, why are these mega bucks going to, lawyers other than African lawyers? It's a very simple principle. He who pays the piper calls the tune. Simple. So the decision is made by clients. And the influencing factor of the decision being made by clients includes, for example, choice of law. So, for example, if the transaction is driven by foreign direct investments, which is what these are, or even if it is driven by local direct investments, you will find that UK law becomes a very critical factor. And that triggers who gets the big size of the deal. Don't kid yourselves. Even the African multinationals, and a lot of them are in this country, have a number of lawyers or a number of law transactions originating from Europe. Can we have the next slide? So what is new? What is going to be new is the CFTA. Now, my prediction is that once you have the CFTA beginning to function properly, the areas of growth will include trade regulation, because there is going to be a lot of trade. I don't know how many lawyers in this room practice trade law as a specialist field. You have the answer yourself. Antitrust, trade disputes, trade finance, and trade finance comes with its own issues relating to how commodities are traded on the market and the need for specialist practice when it comes to that. I'm yet to see one African law firm, and I mean one, which has a specialist practice in trading in metals, etc. Competition law, finance institutions will grow. We are talking about a growth of $1.2 trillion per annum to about $3.4 trillion. That's the kind of market that we are talking about. If that happens, you will find that financial institutions will begin to grow. Now, these financial institutions, unless they are the size which can finance deals in Africa, again, it's not going to be originating from Africa. Cross-border infrastructure. A lot of talk about cross-border infrastructure. Proposed Alexandria to Cape Town and Johannesburg highway, cross-border railways already happening, West Africa, Trans-West Africa highway. Aviation and maritime is going to be very key. People need to move around. Goods have to be, shipped and transshipped. But that will lead to asset finance practice. Again, these type of practices are specialist areas that African lawyers need to start looking at. M&A generally, because for African lawyers to be able to respond, mergers and acquisitions will occur either among themselves, will have to, or they will have to respond to M&A practice for their clients. And government advisory and intellectual property. Next slide. But it is a fact of life, sadly though, that opportunity only comes for the prepared. So you will find that already North Africa had already been invaded for decades. It's nothing new. It started around 2005. So you find Hogan Lovells, DLA Piper, Baker McKenzie, Allen Aubrey, Clifford Chance Dentons, all located around between Morocco, Egypt, Algeria, Tunisia. And then you come down to South Africa. That's why you see the Morocco and South Africa flag on the slide. These are the jurisdictions which have become hubs for foreign law firms. Okay, let's have the next slide. The other thing which is happening is that because of the ABS certification arrangement made by the UK Law Society, that's the Alternative Business Solution, KPMG, Deloitte, Ernst & Young, Pricewaterhouse, all have provided alternative business solutions. And because of the challenges of competition they may have in Europe, they are likely to look at Africa. Maybe likely is not the right word. They are almost looking at Africa, if not already here. Last year at a conference in Ghana, this was a pure lawyers conference. At the end of the conference, there were 250 people there. This is a conference my firm organizes every year. I checked the list of participants. There were 30 participants, all of them with PwC email addresses. But in the room, everybody there was a lawyer. So some of these details you may skip. But PwC, as an example, has got 2,500 lawyers and have decided to launch PwC Legal Family in 2020. Then you have the networks. They are all on the list. I don't want to go through them. But suddenly, Club de Abogados has become very interesting because almost every Portuguese lawyer who is of a certain size actually operates out of Angola or Mozambique. That's also what is happening. And you have various strategies of major networks. The post-OHADA effect, the post-CFTA effect of OHADA is also going to affect this whole thing. Let's have the next slide quickly. Are African firms responding? Some are. ENS, Bowman Gifland from South Africa, Alex from Nigeria. That's the only firm I know made a foray into Ghana, still there. I haven't seen them in any other firm. ALN from East Africa with networks around, including G. Elias in Nigeria. That's the only West Africa entry that they have made, but mainly in Southern Africa. Lex Africa is a network, and of course, AB and David Africa, currently in 5 countries. But you will find that Dentons and DLA Piper have created the Swiss variant arrangement where they have got named franchisees. So the person will have his own letterhead. There is one in Nigeria here, and you have DLA Piper or Dentons at the bottom of it. So the world sees them as being a firm which is global in outlook. So they are Africa firms, and I put a question mark on it. And interestingly, we as AB and David Africa moved to Zimbabwe in August last year, 2 months ahead of Mugabe's, 2 or 3 months ahead of Mugabe's demise. Last week, DLA Piper opened in Bulawayo, in Zimbabwe. They opened the full office in Zimbabwe. So that's to tell you the trend. Next slide, please. So what will drive the growth when the CFTA comes? Is it money, Afrocentricism, following clients, conquest by Big Brother, survival strategy, client satisfaction, desire for mere change, or growth in specific practice areas? I prefer no answer, but these are things that you need to watch, which are likely to be triggering the growth. Next slide. But if you talk about things which will trigger the growth and the growth areas, we need to be discussing what will cause the inertia. In other words, the resistance to change. One may be preference for Big Brother. A lot of Africans prefer to deal with Big Brother than to deal among themselves and expand across the continent. That's a fact we must face. Culture and resistance to merger. Generally, we just can't merge. Language, fear of growth, deliberate attempt to block the entry by other African lawyers into other countries. That also happens. We shouldn't, close our eyes to that fact. And lack of systems and structures generally is also one of the challenges we face. Next slide. What can be done? And quickly, I have a few suggestions. Strategy, cooperation, competition, that's proper competition, putting yourself properly to compete. Gradual integration, standards improvement, and tackling what I call beyond the founder issues. Almost every Africa law firm today still has its founder alive. Because as soon as the firm is growing, somebody leaves, and I don't want to mention the names in Nigeria. I have a track record of the founders and the exits and all the what that happens. So we need to begin to look at, a few firms, especially in Nigeria, are beginning to take a look at it on what happens beyond the founder. So those are some of the things that we need to look at. Next slide. The other thing we need to avoid is the self-deception. There's a lot of self-deception among African lawyers. Cats pretending to be lions. A lot of, we believe in ourselves. We think the knowledge is all that matters. I was the best in the law school, etc. Next slide. Then we need to learn from the emerging Afro champions. For those of you who have not heard, it is a new term which is beginning to creep into the diction of Africa. It's called Afro champions. Entities originating from Africa who have managed to spread across the continents and gone elsewhere. Seplat is listed on the London Stock Exchange, EcoBank, GT Bank, MTN, Dangote, ShopRite. We can learn from them. What does it take to become an African multinational? And again, during the discussions, I can list some of the challenges you face when you want to go into other jurisdictions. And for us, we've gone beyond going to other jurisdictions to now helping people to carry them on our back, to take them into other jurisdictions. And these are important factors we can learn from. Next slide. Either way, one fact is clear. There is either opportunity or disruption. Both are ahead of us. The CFTA presents a major disruption of what is happening. And again, just so that we understand CFTA clearly. If it does happen, and at the moment only 3 countries have lodged their municipal confirmation at the registry in the AU, Ghana, Kenya, and a 3rd country that doesn't come to mind. But we need 22 countries in order to be able to let the CFTA function properly. Of course, Nigeria is here to sign. We haven't said that. If those 22 are attained, it's going to disrupt things a lot. Very, very, very much. It means both for goods and services, Africa becomes the new market, and we are talking about a $3.4 trillion market, which includes law practices. You either decide that it's an opportunity, which means you must prepare now, or you see it as a disruption. And when disruption occurs, one of 2 things, you either survive or die. Thank you.
Well, I want to thank Mr. David for a really, I think, terrific presentation. As I mentioned at the beginning of the session, I'd like to view this as a conversation where we will have a good amount of dialogue among our very esteemed panelists. And so I think what I'll do is I'll start off by asking each of our panelists to reflect on David's presentation. And maybe with Chike, I'll just start with you. And maybe you could give us your sense of what you see as the best opportunities and most serious challenges for African lawyers today in the near future in terms of working in Africa, if you don't mind.
Okay, I mean, thank you, Jay. I think David has brilliantly outlined the challenges that we face as practitioners in Africa, both practicing at home. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Thanks again. As practitioners in Africa, both practicing at home and then looking to practice across borders within Africa, I mean, we face the challenges that David has outlined. These are things that we live as Templars, as other Nigerian lawyers. The opportunities in Nigeria are massive. The deficit in infrastructure in Nigeria is massive. Foreign direct investment into Nigeria is significant. It can be more. And we find that because of the failings we have locally, so for example, the challenge with our courts, the challenge with certain laws or areas of law not having been tested locally, choice of law and choice of jurisdiction tends to be English, occasionally it's New York. So that effectively means that a large portion of what should be local work goes elsewhere. So there's a challenge of what the client requires because of experience, for example. So we work on port deals in Nigeria, we work on airport privatization, we work on new airports, etc. But these have never been done in Nigeria before. So there's the natural requirement for experience to be imported from somewhere else. And international law firms bring that naturally. But it becomes a challenge when these things are perpetrated over decades. Because what we should be looking to see is these learnings come from elsewhere for starters, but over time we expect that there'll be a domestication and a rise of local capacity and the ability of the Nigerian practitioners to step up and continue from where imported services come from. And when we look across borders, going to other places in Africa, we encounter the challenge of protectionism, for example. So we in Nigeria and some other African countries, bigger countries, have the experience now of having done some of these things, and we're able to go elsewhere. But there's the protectionism. So we've had that experience in places like Ghana, etc. So for me, it is capacity. And then when you look to walk across borders, when you build that capacity, there's the issue of protectionism. There's also the issue of preference for international firms, etc.
So, Kamathi, from a Ghanaian perspective, in your own practice, especially given the fact that you yourself were trained educationally abroad, but you've also had African legal education training too. How do you see this issue in terms of challenges and opportunities?
Thank you. I'm not as worried as other people are about, sort of law firms coming to Africa. I think my view is that the whole idea about law practice is human resource. Baker McKenzie is not going to bring somebody from Europe to come and do Nigerian work. DLA Piper is not going to bring anybody from space to come and do Nigeria work. They're going to recruit in Nigeria. They're going to work with the regulators. Now, if it is between me and DLA Piper in Nigeria looking to recruit the best people, I need to make sure that I recruit the best people. Train them the way they would train the people. Pay them the way they would probably pay their people. And then there is an advantage which we have, which they don't have. We understand the culture. We understand the people. And so I think it's good that they're coming, but I don't think there's a big sort of, I don't think we have to be scared. I think we have to welcome the opportunity that they're here. I mean, David and I speak about this sort of many times in Ghana. And when ENS was coming to Ghana, actually first, when ALS was coming to Ghana, you know, everybody was saying ALS is going to take the market, etc. I said, it is my country. It's not possible. It is not possible for you to take the business that I want in my own country. Because it's a human resource issue. It's not going to bring somebody from Nigeria to come and do Ghana law. It's the same with ENS. When they came to Ghana, nothing has changed. The fundamentals of the law practice in Ghana has not changed, if anything at all. It's a South African firm. And there are a lot of South African businesses is coming. And so conflict issues are coming. And so David is getting more jobs from South Africa now because they are in Ghana. So my view generally is, it's much ado about nothing. Thank you.
Thank you. Toyin, you come at this from an interesting perspective because, of course, you worked as a city lawyer in London, but now you're working for a part of the African Development Bank, and you also sort of travel back and forth between the UK and West Africa, but you work throughout the continent. Can you give us your perspective about this issue in terms of the challenges, opportunities that you see, especially given the presentation that we heard from David?
Okay, I think first of all, let me explain exactly what my role is, and I think that will help you to understand my response. So I am legal counsel with the African Legal Support Facility, which is a multilateral institution that is hosted by the African Development Bank. We sit in Abidjan with the bank, but we are a separate and independent institution. We are created by the bank to assist African governments in a negotiation of complex contracts. And at the moment, that seems to be mainly PPAs when it comes to Africa. So our role is very much procuring legal services on behalf of government. And we see the differences between Africa on the continent, all the different countries, the different levels of capacity. And we also see the way that international law firms are engaged in Africa and taking a lot of the work. And admittedly, a lot of that comes from us. We put our hands up to that. But that is because, as I think some of the panelists have said, the need for the upskilling and the exposure of African lawyers onto projects on the continent. One of the things that we see often is when we send out an RFP and we get the bids back, the differences between the international law firms and the national law firms is sometimes quite startling. However, we know that there's capacity in Africa. We know that there is certain capacity in jurisdictions such as Nigeria, Ghana, Kenya, Uganda. We have seen the capacity and the rise in the capacity. So I would say, I agree that African lawyers shouldn't be scared of international law firms coming into the continent. We shouldn't be scared, we should just be prepared. And to be prepared, partner with these law firms, learn from them, adopt their skill practices, adopt their business practices, upskill your juniors and train your juniors. Look to see what are the areas that are going to be most significant when this new agreement takes shape. Look to see what's the future and build on that and build your capacity that way. And network. You have the biggest advantage. Ultimately, African lawyers are Africans. So you have a bigger advantage than somebody coming from Europe or America that doesn't have that sensitivity, that local sensitivity that can make such a difference when working with other lawyers and with governments in Africa.
Thank you. So, and that's actually a nice segue to Jan, because Jan, of course, you're not an African lawyer. You're French, but you work for a UK law firm, and a UK law firm that, of course, has been on the forefront of trying to get into a number of global South markets over the last decade. Could you share with us your perspective about this issue that we've been discussing?
First, good morning, everybody. Delighted to be here, and well done for the fantastic organization. So I'm indeed a partner at Ashurst, one of these UK firms doing business in Africa. I like to think, though, I'm African, at least a bit, because I'm technically French, but by blood 50% Tunisian. So, but yes, I'm doing basically M&A. I'm an M&A lawyer by background, and on top of that, I have a sort of industry, I guess, focus, which is the energy sector, oil, gas, mining, power, and indeed a geographical focus, which is Africa. I'm not doing African law. I'm qualified in England and in France, which means that on every deal I work on, I try to work with you guys, with the best firms in Africa. And I guess, just to get back to the questions, I would tend to think that the key, or the way I see it from my day-to-day practice, the way I see it, the key perhaps challenge and opportunity at the same time for African firms and African lawyers going forward in light of what's happening on the ground, for me would be further, as it's been underlined already, further integration / expansion. Most of the deals I work on in Africa are cross-border, and when I say cross-border, it's actually cross-border between across several African jurisdictions, several African countries. The way we deal with that is, most of the time we have to partner with African firms in each single jurisdiction the deal is related to, in a way, which means we end up, which is great, with a number of firms and lawyers, but the more, I think there will be a lot of opportunity for African firms to operate on a more regional and going forward continental basis. One of the things I'd like to highlight as well is that obviously one of the first steps you take when you're instructed on an M&A deal is put together that famous, the DD report, and when it's a first country investment, your country entry DD report. And one of the areas actually clients ask us to focus more and more is not national, local laws, the local legal framework, but obviously the regional framework. And sometimes, given it would be a cross-border deal and we would work with a number of national firms, we, from a UK perspective or from an international perspective, we would not be necessarily sure which firm or which team, which partner would be best fit to advise on regional law. So there's probably, again, a massive opportunity growth here in terms of positioning yourself as a key expert on, say, OHADA law, for example, if it's West Africa, a lawyer based in Abidjan, but which would be able to cover OHADA law for the whole sub-region. And the last thing I'd like to say is that expansion, actually, of UK firms across Europe and elsewhere is a relatively, if we take a step back, relatively recent process, which started to a large extent in the 70s. A number of UK firms didn't have offices in Paris and in the rest of Europe or elsewhere globally before that time. So it's a process that has very much followed EU integration and regional and globalization regionally and more globally.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you. Wale, you come at this from a slightly different perspective. You're in an accounting firm, KPMG, and of course, accounting firms throughout many global South countries, the one I'm most familiar with is India, of course, have really entered these markets quite aggressively, and there's been resistance from local domestic firms in several of these contexts. So given that backdrop, maybe you could speak to this idea of what it's like to work at an international accounting firm on a continent that right now is at the sort of center of focus for many legal observers, and what the opportunities and challenges that you see are there from your vantage point.
Thank you, Jay, and good morning, everyone. It's my privilege and quite an honor for you to have invited me to join this distinguished panel. Registered with Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria, the same with Chartered Institute of Taxation, which actually has not even allowed foreigners to practice taxation in Nigeria. But then, in spite of this, we are still able to do everything that is happening around you globally. So you have to self-disrupt and really flex the laws regulating the profession in order to allow international firms to be able to join up with you in operating in this country. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. So I want to actually circle back to David and hone in on a couple of points that you made during your presentation. And then, Toyin, I think I'll ask you to jump in here as well. I would like to hear from you, David. You were talking about the Continental Free Trade Agreement and the possible benefits and advantages. But could you just tell us from your perspective, given the presentation that you made, which African markets in particular do you see as the most exciting markets for lawyers to be focusing on?
Maybe Nigeria, and I'm saying may because I'm not so sure about Nigeria's accession to the CFTA. Taking what I know. The other one would have been South Africa, but as an African lawyer, I don't look at South Africa. And the reason is that I cannot compete, so there is no point. So I think my answer to this is very simple. Everything in life is about strategy. And I'll just give you just a peek into my strategy. If we are in 5 African countries, we are about to open the 6th. And somebody will ask, why are you not in Nigeria? And I tell people Nigeria, Egypt, South Africa, Kenya are not interesting markets to me. They are not. I'm not even looking at them. And so it's about strategy.
And why not?
I will explain.
Yeah.
Because
that's a provocative statement for this audience.
Yes, I know. Because I look at the volume. A lot of lawyers work without looking at data. I did a presentation in UK to a couple of Magic Circle firms, and I showed them the data regarding referrals they get. And the total component of referrals all over the world of my practice is only 13%. Of that 13%, 80% comes from UK. Now, that has dropped, and you have about half of that coming from Paris. Chike is here. Why will he look for me to find a lawyer in Nigeria? But he will need me to find a lawyer in Burundi, where I have an affiliate firm, or Rwanda, or Liberia, or Sierra Leone. So my strategy is look at the markets that nobody is in. But collectively, if you put these markets together, they are bigger than Nigeria. And we shouldn't kid ourselves about that. There is a client I have who is in fast-moving commodities, whose commodities were stopped in Nigeria because of some change in law. And I told her, why are you focusing on Nigeria? 70% of your exports were into Nigeria. I took her to Uganda, Zambia, and Liberia. And she's selling more than she was selling in Nigeria. So it's a question of strategy. Depending on your strategy, you behave according to that strategy. Maybe one day I'll look at Nigeria.
Thank you. Toyin, please.
Okay. It's on, yeah. Right. From my perspective, exciting jurisdictions. I would say Ethiopia is somewhere I've been doing quite a bit of work in Ethiopia. My slant is mainly on power, so I'm going from that perspective. But Ethiopia is a very exciting.
Toyin, I'm sorry. Could you just maybe move the microphone?
Very exciting. Is that better? A very exciting jurisdiction. Obviously, there's political unrest, so that's the challenges that you will face. But there is a strategy there for growth in all areas. So if you're looking for a market, I'd say Ethiopia. Sierra Leone, Liberia, two markets that David mentioned, new governments have just been formed there. There's a new sheriff in town. That's always an interesting time to get on board behind a new regime. Another one I would say is to look at is Sudan. Sudan, there's been the lifting of sanctions, not completely gone yet, but when that market opens up, it will be huge. And already I'm getting people asking me, do I know any lawyers in Sudan? Is there anybody in Sudan you know that can help me with a potential project, a potential bid? So that's another interesting market. Again, Zimbabwe. We heard DLA Piper have already set up shop there. I mean, that's an indication of how quickly. I mean, for a long time, people have been looking at Zimbabwe and waiting for government change to see when they can go in. So I know there's a lot of investors. There's a lot of natural resources there. So again, that's another exciting market. And of course, there's, everyone always says Nigeria, but I think there's enough Nigerian lawyers to deal with the market here. But if you're looking outside, I would say Ethiopia, Sudan, Zimbabwe, Sierra Leone, and not to forget the Francophone countries as well, Senegal. East Africa, Uganda, signed many PPAs, been very effective in that term. And another area that I think is really important for all of Africa is the issue of sovereign debt. Sovereign debt is going to become an issue. So if you're looking to help, get on board on that area as well.
Yeah, thank you. Did anyone want to add anything? Jan, would you like to add? And Wale, maybe to say a minute here while we, yeah. Oh, sorry, yeah, and you'll have to again.
I very much concur with all the countries Oyin mentioned. Maybe from a regional again integration perspective, I guess that mature markets, well-lawyered markets, such as Nigeria, obviously Kenya, South Africa, again have a massive opportunity. Regional hubs as well, and they match to a large extent, because again it's going to be a lot more difficult for lawyers in smaller jurisdictions, in less mature jurisdiction, to advise on regional law on some issues that are becoming a lot, and that will become, I expect, a lot more complex and technical, such as regional antitrust, filings, analysis and stuff. So you guys in Nigeria, lawyers in Kenya, lawyers in Togo, in Benin, in Namibia will by definition probably have to focus a bit more on national laws and regulations, but you will have the opportunity to take a bigger place in the regional, I guess, spectrum.
Thank you. Well,
okay, first, if I look at the way commercial businesses look at expansion, I think the question they first ask themselves is, okay, in the country where they are in, have they really maximized the opportunities? Okay, so before you think about going cross-border, it's a question of, okay, have you even exhausted the opportunities that were within your country? Now, even when you have not done that, you may also decide that, okay, you want international business in order to complement what you're doing and then grow in other markets. So you go to economies where businesses are growing, where the economy is also growing. And I would say a model that has been tested and is very successful is that you go where your clients are going. Okay, so MTN is going cross-border. Dangote is going cross-border. GT Bank is going cross-border. EcoBank is going cross-border. And some other Nigerian banks and Nigerian businesses as well. So you follow them in order to be able to set up practices or join up with other firms in those practices, so that, because those companies also, they will be interested in one firm that can actually serve them across borders, because that really helps with coordination rather than having to deal with 20 disparate firms. If you have one firm that can coordinate your legal issues in various countries, it's very, very efficient, for corporate organizations. And then also look at countries that are investing in infrastructure. Okay, Toyi mentioned Ethiopia, for instance. Yes, that's one country that's investing significantly in infrastructure now. And I look at also reforming economies as well, and privatizing, for instance. So those are what will throw up opportunities that make it worthwhile for you to go cross-border. Thank you.
Thank you. Please.
Yeah, just a quick comment about, or two quick comments. And I want to emphasize that strategy is very important. Everybody has a different goal. And I hear this cliche all the time. We go where our clients are going. As a firm, and I lead my firm strategy, we don't go where our clients are going. No, we don't. And I say that all the time. We go to where we think our clients will come, or we take the clients along. Because if you go where your clients are going, it's already, when you hear of an opportunity, it is already too late. You must create the opportunity. I went to Zimbabwe before DLA Piper came, or before anybody thought about it. And I went to Zimbabwe 3 times and picked lawyers from 3 different firms and created a gap and filled the gap which was not there. Everybody thought I was crazy. I did a session about Zimbabwe, and I told people that Mugabe was not going to be there forever. And 3 months after we opened our office big in Zimbabwe, Mugabe was gone. I didn't know he was going to go. Today, the Magic Circle firms, apart from one, every one of them is working with a Zimbabwe firm. We started with 3 lawyers, we're already 6. So this business about going where our clients are going is one strategy. My strategy is different. Last week, we organized an investment conference in Zimbabwe and took businesses from Ghana and other places there. The second comment I want to make is about Ethiopia. Great market, but look at Ethiopia practice. Until about 5 years ago, Ethiopian lawyers were not allowed to form partnerships. By law, Ethiopian lawyers had to be individuals. When IBA set up a committee to help Ethiopian lawyers on how to practice, I was one of the people who helped guide a few Ethiopian lawyers on how to put. So, and as of today, the regulations have not been passed. So a lawyer in Ethiopia who says I have a firm is only practicing because he holds a license and everybody else is a sub-licensee under him. So yes, it's a market to look at, but your strategy must reflect whether you enter that market or not and how you treat it. So I think just taking one solution or taking what everybody else is doing at times is where the challenge is.
So it's an interesting point, because in a lot of ways I hear you saying that this is lawyer-led rather than client-led. And so I want to talk to both Chike and Kimathi about this, which is, first, do you agree with that? And secondly, relating to this issue of what David said, I think it's premised on the idea that we have knowledge of what's happening in other markets. And to have that type of knowledge, of course, we need legal relationships, legal ties, legal networks. How important is that to your practice? How effective have those legal relationships been as you've looked at other African states in which to engage in business?
Okay, starting with whether you follow your clients or you lead your clients, I think, as David said, it's about strategy and you decide where you want to go. But my experience at Templars has been that in many situations, our clients have come to us and said, we're looking to go to this market and we need you to hold our hands. And
So it's actually, it is a different strategy.
Which is not to say that, so it depends upon what the firm is looking to achieve. So these are situations where clients have come to us and we've on numerous occasions looked at expanding outside of Nigeria. And there are various pushes and pulls around that. But what we've done successfully is lead clients into a number of these jurisdictions based upon relationships that we have with other firms in those jurisdictions. In many instances, very recently I helped a client sell a business in French West Africa. And I didn't need an international law firm to do that work. The buyer required an international firm. I used the services of a relationship firm who I met in the course of a relationship with a third law firm. Now, the work we did there at the end of the day was probably 80–90% of the legal work required on that transaction. And we've replicated that on a number of other occasions. And it sort of makes you feel bad because you're suddenly becoming that international law firm format with law firms in smaller African jurisdictions. But back to your question about relationships. We have relationships with international firms, the sorts of things that David spoke about. So you have best friend relationships with the Magic Circle, the White Shoe firms out of New York, etc. And what we've also achieved from those relationships is that we found that it helps us get closer. So, I mean, the African lawyers on this panel are people that we actually initially met in the course of relationships with international firms that we have best friend relationships with. So that creates a platform for us to then develop these relationships on an Africa level. And when we have work to do in Ghana, elsewhere, we rely upon those relationships that we're creating out of other relationships with international firms. And it's been very useful for us. And referrals between the firms we have here is significant in terms of those relationships.
Right. Great. Kamathi, did you want to, please?
That's, I think part of the visibility of my firm in Ghana has come. Can I hold it this way?
Yeah, please. Very good. Yes, very good.
I think part of the visibility that, I think I can do it this way. I think this is better. Is there a way that this kind of sitting can be changed sometime in the future? No, I think this will be fine. But I think part of the visibility of my firm, I think, has largely been because of relationships. And it started from Templars. It's my first big relationship when I came back from America to set up. It started from Templars. And that's where it started from. I was not looking for somebody in New York or abroad. It's just that I had a friend in Templars, and then it started. And that's where the growth started. So for me, relationship is not really foreign in the sense in which sort of it has to be in New York or in London, but just people that you connect with, who you can sort of deal with and think with. So that's first. For me, the second part also, every time I have the relationship, even with Templar, I said, I'm not looking for work. I'm looking for opportunity to train my people to grow, to understand sort of how to be a much more efficient law firm. And so every time I meet sort of any law firm, big law firms, or we go for this meeting, I said, if I am much more efficient and I do my work very well, the work is going to come. So when I started off as a practice, I was always looking for opportunities for growth, opportunities for training. And so part of our training is that we're able to send our associate, before you become an associate, or just when you become an associate in the law firm, to a big law firm in London to be part of their training. And it's been extremely significant in terms of just the growth, just the confidence, and more importantly, just the enlightenment that offers young lawyers who think that they are big people in the country. But it just changes just even the way they approach and creative about the work. So I have found it to be extremely useful.
Well, that actually leads me to a point that I'd like to ask the panel, and that is skill sets. As we're thinking about the Continental Free Trade Agreement, we're thinking about globalization and how that's affecting law practice. We have a lot of people in this room who are going to be the next generation of lawyers. And I guess the question that I wrestle with in my own classroom, but I know that a lot of younger lawyers are constantly seeking information on, is what skill sets do you think are going to be necessary to be successful as a 21st century lawyer in a region that is clearly trying to globalize, breaking down barriers in terms of free trade? I'm happy to open it up to anyone here about this. Please, David.
Okay, maybe I should come in quickly on that. And I'll emphasize something that I never stop emphasizing. The question of skill set and what skill sets you need is a question of strategy. And strategy depends on the rank of the ladder you occupy. Now, and I have to make a few points. In Ghana, I believe you cannot count the three top law firms without counting my firm. That level gives you a different requirement. I wasn't the same 15 years ago. Similarly, if you came to Nigeria and you were looking at Olaniwo Ajayi, Aluko Ayobode, or any of the big firms, their strategy will be different in terms of skill set than a strategy somebody who sets up one little law firm called Osofia practice from a Papa market. It will not be the same strategy that templates will be having. So,
It's your phone.
so at times when we talk about topics of this nature, we tend to generalize. Having said that, the important point about the skill set is what is the sort of market that you are seeking to increase your market share in it? And do you want to increase your market share at all? And I'll give you a couple of examples. If you do a lot of power work, you will realize that the growth of power work in Africa is such that these days we are able to do power work in Ghana, and I'm talking about my firm, from start to finish. We've done major power deals, 600 megawatt power deals from start to finish, and I mean from start to finish. And we are the ones who referred the work to an English law firm and said, maybe the financing is based on English law. Can you advise on this? There's nothing wrong with hiring an English law firm in the reverse. I've just issued 2 RFPs to English law firms. So everything depends on that strategy. So if, for example, you have a lot of power work, then your skill set you should be developing is letting people be interested in that power sector industry. Or if you look at CFTA happening and you see that there are likely to be trade disputes, then you are likely to be training people in that sector. The last point, which is very important, which African law firms often overlook, is structures and systems. Without structures and systems, nothing works. You can have all the law. The non-lawyer role is very, very key. I know a law firm, I don't want to mention the name, one of the biggest law firms in Nigeria hired an ex-Big Four, either KPMG or Pricewaterhouse, and he changed everything in that law firm. We have just hired somebody who is the risk and assurance manager from Barclays to join the firm. And it is because of where we are. It's a question of strategy, the rank of the ladder you occupy, and the market share that you want to. Otherwise, we'll be comparing things which don't have to be compared.
Toyin, do you want to say something about this?
Yeah, I agree. I think you really have to look at where you want your firm to go and build your strategy based on that. I think the problem that I've seen in the past with African lawyers is that they're very good lawyers, but your clients actually need lawyers with a good sense of business awareness. So they want not just a lawyer, they want a business consultant. So I think you have to ensure that's why I was so excited when I first heard about the SBL, the section on business law, because I thought finally we're seeing that somebody's taking the initiative to train lawyers, not just to be lawyers, but to be business lawyers. So I think an understanding of the areas we're moving into will automatically evolve the skill sets that you want to develop for your lawyers. And it's very important to be on top of that and aware of what you're doing in that regard. So I agree with David in that respect, that think about where you want to go and then develop the skill sets accordingly. You know, obviously technology is hugely important, understand those kind of things as well. That's what I wanted to add.
Do you want to say something?
I think
And Trigger, maybe what I'll also ask you to add to this is clearly your law firm is hiring, I know this firsthand, lawyers who are graduating from the Nigerian law school, lawyers who are young lawyers who are coming into the firms. Is there anything that you're seeing that legal education institutions need to do better in terms of providing skill sets that they're not doing currently?
okay, so I think to answer your last question first, legal institutions need to start training lawyers, because at the moment they don't. And
as a law professor, that doesn't sound very good to hear. So,
unfortunately,
yes.
at the moment they don't.
Right.
But to pause on that for a moment, I think when we say what skills do we as African lawyers require to meet the challenges of the future, I wouldn't worry so much about the specific areas of law. I mean, those we will tackle as we identify them. Those are obvious places to go and look. The things that I think we need to do are even the most basic of things. Systems and structures, as someone has said, soft skills, commercial awareness, the ability to project and sell yourself, the ability to instill confidence in your clients, the ability to manage transactions, the ability to plan. You know, when we work with international firms and international clients, the usual complaints you hear about African firms is responsiveness, availability. When people go to David, go to us, etc., and say, can you help me find a lawyer in so and so country? It is often because perhaps they've been, I worked on a deal in a country that I wouldn't mention, and there were only 2 law firms to speak of in that country that if you had international transactions to do, you would go to. And there were particular days of the week on which the name partner in the firm went away, shut down, and went to play golf or something. And so that meant that on those transactions, 2 days of the week, there was unavailability. There are situations where people do not respond to emails for, you know, so it's really those soft, simple things around organization, around being business sensitive that I would focus on first and foremost. What do law schools have to do better? Law schools have to teach those subjects, obviously, that are important in the business world. Law schools have to open up the minds of law students so that we're thinking as potential solvers of business problems. When we hire new lawyers in the leading firms in Nigeria, we find that the first few years are essentially a re-education period. And so that is something that we need to tackle at law schools. But perhaps it's really something that one couldn't solve in that there's always the theoretical and then you come to practice and it's a different world.
Jan, did you want to speak to this?
I very much concur with that. I guess there's probably, in terms of skill set, there's probably going to be 2 things going forward. Obviously, there's the digital economy, new softwares, IT, but I guess, you know, younger lawyers probably know already more about that than us. I guess the other trend is maybe specialization, focus. Obviously, contract law is a given, but what do you know about PPAs? What do you know about sanctions in that region? What do you know about gas sale agreements, etc., etc.? So specialization. But in the end, I very much agree that it's a relationship-driven business. What will not change and what will remain key is all these soft skills plus the commercial business sense about being a boardroom advisor, taking a step back and focus on the black letter law, obviously, but also on the wider issues at stake.
Yeah, please, Wale.
Again, share my experience, and that speaks to what Toyin said. Believe me, I was a crack young lawyer. I love it. I love the law. But I just felt, you know, there was this empty side of me, which was I didn't know anything about how to run a business. I was really out of that inquisitiveness that led me to trying to do something outside the law. And believe me, the combination of the two really has made me a complete person. And that goes back to the curriculum of the accounting. Really, they are missing a lot. If I look at the market in Nigeria today, for instance, accountants are sought after for opportunities that lawyers also have been well positioned for, if they are trained, along that line. And it's about time for the profession to actually look into that in order to ensure that people are well-rounded in order to really position them, particularly for the kind of opportunities that we're talking about. Because really, there's no other way to make Nigerian lawyers internationally competitive. I mean, any KPMG person can go anywhere in the world and you'll fit in appropriately. But could Nigerian lawyers live here and then go to a New York law firm or UK law firm and then settle in seamlessly without really feeling some deficiencies in certain areas and kind of skills that they've had. So really, it's very, very important, training and development, and it's a continuous process. You don't stop, otherwise really, you are going to find yourself less competitive, compared to other firms that you work with, in the industry.
Yes.
Just a quick comment on what he said. Yeah, in respect of law schools now having to do better at training lawyers. Maybe, I don't know whether that pertains in Nigeria, but the General Legal Council, that's the regulator in Ghana, decided to train lawyers slightly better by introducing a subject called Introduction to Practice Management. And that started 3 years ago, and I happened to be the anchor lecturer, trying to let them understand what really happens in practice. And I have a batch of mandatory interns in my office, and this is like the third batch. And the general comment around, and I've heard this around, and that they are beginning to become a bit better. So probably these are things we need to be looking at.
Kamathi, do you want to please?
So we don't recruit lawyers. We recruit law students. So part of my strategy when I came back was I've never recruited a lawyer before, because you're going to spend another 3 years trying to train him. So we don't do interns. It's a training program, and we take you when you're going to 2 years before you finish law school. So it's compulsory. And part of it is to be able, it's like what they do in London. Like it's more like the training contract. Sort of you join us when you're a law student, and then we start teaching you the things that we would be teaching you when you become a lawyer, which is normally what happened before we started that process. And then we have a very strict training manual, including you read a book a week and give me a book report every Monday. So every Monday I have a book report from all. So I have four or five trainers now. Some are sort of doing LLB, some are now in the law school. So every Monday morning, you have to send me a book report. And part of it is because I'm looking for scholars who are lawyers. So that's one. Secondly, manners. So when we finish law school, we have an over-exaggerated opinion of ourselves because we're wearing a big wig. And so the way we treat people, the way we talk, the way we do things is always different. So I teach manners. I teach the simple things, how to make friends and influence people. It's a compulsory reading in my law firm. Everybody has to read it. Just how do you deal with people? How do you manage people? How do you sort of relate to clients? So that's second. And the third one is we have a compulsory training manual. So I know what you're going to do in the 4th month. I know what you're going to do in the 5th month until you finish that 2 years. And then we send you to London to go and train with a foreign law firm before you can actually start sort of thinking of yourself as a lawyer. And we have found that to be a wonderful, I think, part of sort of the reason why, as young as we are, we do these huge transactions in Ghana. It's just because of our different approach to training, and that has been a significant change in our practice. And also, and two things. I'm not even worried about the skill. Urgency. Just urgency. I teach people how to walk when they start in my law firm. Just people walk as if the world belongs to them. So there are very, very basic things, and then availability. So in my law firm, you will never see an email which says, I am in a conference in Nigeria and therefore you can't get to me. That's we don't do it in the law firm. And that's one of the things that we teach them, because availability is actually as important as the skill. And that's how we sort of manage that.
I appreciate that. Thank you. So I've been informed that we are actually going to try to stay on schedule for the remaining part of the day, which leaves us with about 20 minutes. And I thought what we would do at this point is that we would open it up to the audience to have more of an interactive session with the people seated in the hall here. So there are microphones that are going around. If anyone wanted to ask any more questions, I have several more questions that I would be eager to ask if we don't have any takers. But please, I see a hand right there, and maybe we could just begin. And if keep your interventions brief so that we could get as many people in the audience to participate, that would be great. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Vade Folake Adewusi from ALEX. Okay, so during the discussion, they said something about law school not preparing young lawyers for the practice of law. My question is, how can this be addressed? Because really, you can't give what you don't have. Now, the Nigerian system does not encourage law lecturers or law school lecturers to practice. And how do they want to teach people about the practical areas of business when all what most of them know is actually just the theory of law? Thank you.
Cheke?
Okay, I think I'm told that the section on business law, for example, is creating SBL clubs. I'm told the section on business law is creating SBL clubs across universities in Nigeria. At our level as SBL committee members, I think occasionally we get invited to the law school to interact with law students at the Nigerian Law School. I think those sorts of encounters, I think they're things to be encouraged. And I think also when law schools send law students to law firms, or what we call the law office attachment or whatever, we find that the pressure on the law students is really the pressure of preparing for the exams that follow soon after they come for the internship. So 90% of the time they spend in law firms, they are studying for their exams. So it tends to be oftentimes a waste of time. So when we send out law students to go and do law office attachment, court attachment, I think the calendar should be set in a way that they are allowed to focus on what they've been sent to do at that time, rather than be preparing for exams that will follow a week after they go back to law school.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. Wale, and then maybe what we will do after Wale and Toyin want to respond to this, we'll take maybe 4 questions at a time, and then we'll move it back here. So Toyin and then Wale, please.
Hi, going back to the question, how to train a lawyer to be practical. When I trained to be a lawyer, I went to law school, and it was very dry, and it was very boring, and it was very procedural. However, the real training came when I was actually in the firm, and it's very much, I would put, as much as law schools need to change the curriculum, yes, to make it more effective for lawyers in this current market, I'd also put the onus back on law firms and your seniors in law firms. That is where you're going to learn to be a lawyer. And it's emulating what you see the seniors doing, and the seniors making time for the juniors to ensure that they understand why you do things, how you do things, and what's to be gained by doing things. So I think really and truly, as much as we are critiquing law schools on the curriculum, again, law practitioners, senior practitioners, really need to invest time in juniors to teach them how to practice. One other thing I should mention is at the ALSF, we are launching what we call the ALSF Academy, where there'll be the opportunity for young lawyers to be trained in the areas of law in which we practice, which are oil and gas, power, sovereign debt, PPPs, infrastructure. So please look out for that. That's an opportunity. And another thing I would say is look out for other opportunities for young lawyers as well. Secondment programs such as International Lawyers for Africa, where you have a chance to sit with an international law firm, such as the one where Jan works in London.
The lecturers to come and talk on things that are outside the law, maybe economy, it can be things on business management, entrepreneurship, financial management, and things like that, that could actually help them. And then leadership, and things like that. So that will help, at least in ensuring that all they've taken in the law school is not just law and law alone, but other things. Yeah. The other thing that the law students also could explore will be summer internships in other places outside law firms. I mean, my firm, for instance, will take easily 100 people every summer from different backgrounds, and they could explore, so long as they meet academic requirements that they are on a second class upper or first class honors track, for instance. It's highly competitive, but we are hoping, to take in lawyers, to come and join us and just experience,
Right.
outside legal profession, which will also help them again in reorientating them in seeing, the business world and how they themselves fit in.
Perfect, perfect. So why don't we take a couple of questions here? We have this, yes, young woman right there, and then we have a couple of questions, and then please keep your interventions quite brief so that we can, because we're running short on time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good morning. My name is Evelyn James. I'm from Akpabio Chambers and Co., Akwa Ibom State. My question goes thus: what can be done for those of us who are already in the system, young lawyers who actually went through law school and didn't have that basic training to handle business transactions, and then we come from the parts of the country where we are not located in Lagos or Abuja, where these opportunities are rampant, and we need to be a part of these opportunities. We hunger for it, but we are not given the opportunities. What can be done for us? And like in the medical sector, you have those mentorship programs or trainings for the medical students who come out and they're not just left hanging loose looking for how to start up or where to begin. What can be done for us who are already in the system and we desire to move up the scale, but we are not given the opportunities? What can be done for us, especially those of us who are not in Lagos and Abuja, where these opportunities are?
All right, thank you, thank you. So we have one hand there, and then our organizer, our one of our main panelists, has his hand up right here. So
okay, thank you very much. My name is Dayo Ashonibare. I'm of the Abuja Bar. I think the major problem is a foundational issue. Now you see a professor in the university using his 1980 notes, and the students are excited that this man knows this thing very well, and he's not updated with the current trend. But I think there is a way forward with the current section on business law, business club. Now, this club needs to take a step further by also influencing our curriculum, because they know all these things. They are the ones that can bring these new trends into our curriculum. And I believe with the new section on business law club, I believe all these things can be changed so that we don't just prepare for exams and pass exams, then we come out there hanging and they call us names such as charge and bill. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. So I do have Kamati. You had to? Could you stay for a few minutes? Or, yeah. Okay, please. Please, we had the hand there, yes. And then we'll have Kunle here.
Yes, my name is Ayodele Akitunde SAN. Mine is an intervention, and it is to the effect that I think the NBA has to do much more than organizing talks like this. I say this because when you look at some jurisdictions, they have moved past just a situation where we talk about this to implement things based on research. For instance, in England, the Law Society of England and Wales have what they call Lexcel. It is a way where you can structure your firm to attain excellence. It deals with issues like client care, deals with file management, deals with risk management, deals with financial management. So when you have all these kind of structures in place, it gives a firm to strive at attaining excellence, meeting all these standards. This also applies in jurisdictions like Australia and Canada. The Law Society must create a general platform, because when you hear many of the speakers, they are talking about what certain firms have done. They have moved past being just lawyers, they are businessmen. It is for the Law Society, it's for the MBA to graduate us from just looking at letters, black and white, using research tools to enable us develop our practice generally across the board. So the lawyer in Akwa Ibom, the lawyer in Maiduguri has something to aspire to. He looks at this certain criteria. Does my firm meet this criteria? Do my lawyers operate like this? Do we have enough client care? Do we have enough risk management? So the law society must have something good for us.
Thank you. Kunle, did you want to say something? Kunle. Sorry.
Good morning. My name is Kunle Ajagbe, and I work with Adam Partners. Now, my intervention is a bit of a challenge to us as lawyers individually. And I mean this in the sense that I think the fault ultimately, if there is a fault, lies in us, not in our stars. We must begin to rise up to the challenges that we face. And I'll give one or two examples. Between Nigeria and India, which is a country I'm quite familiar with, trade flows is about $10 billion annually. As between Nigeria and China, which is a country I'm less familiar with, trade flows is about $14 billion annually. And so I asked the question, how many of us here, as lawyers, individually or as a collective, what is our share in that trade flow? In other words, as between those two countries, that amount of money is moving in. And are we comfortable that we are not involved in that exchange of money, that amount of money? Now, Nigerians, when we seek medical attention, of course, it's a no-brainer. We know where many of us go to. But it's not just to India. Nigerians are going to Egypt. Nigerians are going to Dubai. Which lawyers are involved in that? You don't need law school to teach you that, quite frankly. Let us call a spade a spade. All you need is an awareness of the way the world is working, an awareness of the way economic plays. People will go to where they can get a good deal. Whether lawyers follow them there or they create that opportunity, lawyers need that awareness. And really, there's only so much law school can teach us. I'm a product of law school. So many of us here are products of the law school. They will do their best, but personally, I believe the SBL would intervene, but it won't put bread and butter on your table. It will not give you that mandate. Ultimately, I think it is the responsibility of all of us in our respective practices to scale up. The competition is there already, and listening to the eminent panel who have addressed us today, it's quite clear. The ball has moved, the train has left the station. It is how quickly we can jump on board that matters now. But it's ultimately important to accept the challenge, please, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jay, for giving me the permission to speak. I thought I should mention quickly that at the SBL, we are extremely, extremely concerned about the future of the legal profession in Nigeria. And when we talk about this, we must try to situate ourselves 50 years hence, 50 years from now, what type of lawyers will be in this jurisdiction. Now, Kunle just spoke about what will put bread and butter on your table. We are not talking just about the lawyers today. We're talking about those that are being trained now. And if they are not being given the right tools, it's a major problem because a time will come when they will be the senior lawyers. So what will they have to teach anybody, right? So Chike, my partner, mentioned about the SBL, our interventions. We decided that we will not twiddle our thumbs any longer. We in Nigeria know how difficult it is to get government to move on any issue. Change is such a big deal in these parts. It is the way we do it, and that's the way we do it. End of story. So, because it is boggling to the mind that the curricula that we find in our schools today are the ones that my late uncle, Justice of the Supreme Court, probably confronted when he was in school. But nobody, well, I mean, we will talk to the Nigerian Universities Commission and the Council on Legal Education, but while we do that, set up the SBL Club. we have 18 committees at the, and this is in response to Learned Senior Advocate Ayo Akintunde. We have 18 committees at the SBL. We set up the business law clubs at the universities, University of Lagos, Ahmadu Bello University and Bayes University, and more to come. We will take our committees to the students who are studying at the moment. They have the internet to follow up on that. We will introduce them to contemporary law issues or subjects. Secondly, with the Nigerian Institute of Advanced Legal Studies, we are having a conversation at the moment. We want to set up the NBA SBL Center for Commercial Law Studies, right? So the idea, Learned Senior Advocate Osaro Egobamia is heading our task force on that. The idea is to sit down with the Institute of Advanced Legal Studies and through our committees, run diploma awarding or certificate awarding programs in these areas of the law. This is what we're going to do. Now, we have in our Banking and Finance Committee a pilot project with the law firm of Stevenson Howard. We're doing the first one where we'll do a 2-week program and we'll get the young lawyers and not so young lawyers to participate. So I think as law societies, bar associations, we can do that because those who are throwing it, like Tony, who are saying those of us in the law firms have a responsibility, I agree with you, but there's precious little you can do with, I hesitate to use the expression damaged goods, yeah? Because there's something that, there's certain things that are unteachable after a while. So that's why I thought it's important that we do it now and we we intervene at that level. And hopefully, Universities Commission and Council on Legal Education will follow suit. Thank you.
So let me just, because we have we've only been allotted 3 more minutes, I want to at least give any of our panelists a quick 30-second opportunity to respond. And then I've been flooded with just wonderful questions here directed at several of our panelists. And so because we have a half-hour break now, I think, correct? I would encourage all of you who have a comment to please come up afterwards because our panelists, I think, except for Kamati, who has to leave, will all be here and they're willing to take your questions. So just very quick responses by our panelists before we conclude.
To me, the fundamental thing, and that's the message I want to leave for the lawyers in this room, particularly the leadership, is that we need to reform the profession. If I look at Legal Practitioners Act, it's always been the way it's been. And really, barring foreign lawyers does not help the profession in Nigeria. Everything we are talking about, like training of lawyers and all of that, if you are part of international network, the opportunities will be vast. You'll have access to global best practices. So to me, that's the very fundamental thing that you need to work on. And then you create opportunities for young lawyers. I feel very sad seeing lawyers out of the law school, no jobs. And perhaps today we have more lawyers who are actually out of work than those who are actually working. That needs to change. And to change, really, we need to change the structure of the profession. Thank you.
Thank you. Jan, did you quickly want to say?
Well, the one message, which is a positive one, I guess, I'd like to convey from my perspective, and it does relate to a number of questions we've had, is that I think the relationship between so-called international firms and African firms, and I think you will agree, is changing. It's a lot more a two-way relationship. It's definitely a relationship between equals, and the comments, the discussions we had about referrals is a good example. The old way probably is an international firm being instructed by one of its clients and then contacting one of the best friends in X, Y, or Z jurisdiction. Well, in my experience, it's more and more the case that if the deal is about one key project in one jurisdiction, clients, for many reasons, efficiency, cost, expertise, would go directly, especially if they've had the chance to work with that firm before, go directly to the firm that is the closest to the project, ask them to advise on the project, and then often, and more often actually, ask them if there is a financing governed by English law or an M&A transaction, again, governed by international law. Ask them who they would like to work with, which international firm they would like to. So referrals work both ways, and obviously that trend, I think, is supported by a number of organizations, including ASLF. So I think the relationship is changing for the better, and that's, I think, something we're going to see more and more, planned relationship being driven by African firms.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, I'm going to answer on a number of points. One, there was a lady, Evelyn Jones, who made the point about how can she access all this training, etc., when she's outside Lagos or Abuja. I'm not based in Nigeria, so I cannot comment on that so much. But what I would say to her is, we now live in the age of technology. And if you have internet access, there are so many courses you can do online. There's so much information you can gain to make yourself more aware of what's going on in your profession, what's going on in your country, what's going on in the continent. So I would encourage Evelyn and all young lawyers to do that. Going to the other point of the relationship between international law firms and African law firms, I would say yes, the situation is changing, and that has to change. And African law firms have to realize their value in this. At the end of the day, the African law firms should be the gatekeepers when it comes to business in Africa. And you do that by ensuring that you don't have one best friend with an exclusivity contract, but you have many best friends. That way you get more presence. So make sure that when you're thinking of branching out, as this new dawn arises, that legal services can go across the continent, I'd really encourage you to ensure that you don't saddle yourself to just one law firm. One of the things that we want to do at the ALSF, we're currently putting together a panel structure where we have a panel of international law firms and we'll have a panel of African law firms. And ultimately, our aim one day will be that RFPs have to go to African law firms who then have to choose which international law firm they want to work for. We're not quite there yet, but that time is coming. So international law firms need to be aware. Those are my closing remarks.
Thank you. Dave?
In respect of, I want to use the word global law firms instead of international law firms, in respect of the relationship between global law firms and African firms. And I use that because I'm an international law firm. Yeah, so right. If you are in 5 countries, you are an international law firm. Now, in respect of that relationship, I think my advice to African law firms is that you don't necessarily need to expand unless you want to. But the important thing is to upskill in your standards of practice. And that's why we'll go back to what the gentleman who made reference to Lexel said. We became the first certified Lexel firm in Africa. And as of last year, we were still the only certified Lexel firm in Africa. But if you decide to do that, you have to be ready for scrutiny, because every year we do have inspectors from UK checking every standards of practice. But there is something for it. Subjecting ourselves to that for 5 years, we've learned so much. Today, we are doing a cross-border transaction for LSF on Ghana-Togo cross-border pipeline study. So there is something that you can get from that. The second thing I want to give, which is my last advice, is law firms should focus on training their lawyers. I know law schools have to do something, that is fine. But if you don't focus on training your lawyers, you can never build the capacity to deal with transactions when you get them. And training is costly. And there's an advice I give whenever I talk to my colleague lawyers, and this is surprising, they don't look at that. At times they look at the cost of training lawyers, and they ask the question, and this is particularly common in Africa, you train the lawyer and he leaves. So the question they ask themselves, if I'm going to spend $100,000 training lawyers over 5 years, what if they leave? The answer I give is very simple. What if they stay? Because if they stay, if they stay and you don't train them, you cannot handle the transactions.
And Chike, do you want to close out this?
Okay. The relationship between global firms and African firms, I think those relationships present opportunities, capacity building, We send our associates and all on secondments across mature markets, etc. Even us as senior lawyers get soft skill training, all of that. We refer work back and forth amongst ourselves. So grab those opportunities with both hands, but at the same time also try as much as possible to increase what we get out of those relationships in terms of how much more of the work comes to the African firms. I see increasingly, or maybe not necessarily increasingly, I see an incremental tendency for a balance between the relationships. So the African firms are gaining incrementally. But we also continue to see situations where global firms hog work. So you're working with African firms and the work split is a problem, split grab, etc. So it is to try be a little more assertive and have the capacity to also deliver when you assert. So when you say we have to be copied into all the emails, we have to be at all the meetings, you don't just go there and imbibe the air. You make a contribution, and as you make those contributions, the clients at the end of the day begin to depend upon you and require that you be in the room when certain things happen. Talking about training lawyers, I mean, I do a lot of recruiting, and what is most important is really about a way of thinking. It's not about how much law you know. In Nigeria, we repeat this a lot, something Lord Denning said, God forbid that a lawyer must know all the law. So it's really about your capacity to think, your capacity to stay informed about things, not just law. Those things open your mind and enable you to be a tool in the markets that we work in today.
Thank you so much. So I want to thank all of you. We are about 7 minutes over, which is not too bad, I think. And I want to, again, apologize for not being able to get to all of your questions. But as I said, the panelists should be here for the next 20 minutes. And if you wanted to chat with them during the tea break, you're more than welcome. So thank you once again, and let's thank all of our panelists.
Thank you, Professor Jay.
Hello, thank you everyone for your participation in the session. May we call the Conference of West African Attorney Generals, CWAG, for their presentation.
The presentation by CWAG is going to take 10 minutes. And after that, we'll go for tea break. Tea break is not ready. We're going there in 10 minutes' time. So CWAG, you have the floor.
Thank you. Good morning, our wonderful panelists. It's been a wonderful time. And the chairman of the SBL, somebody says that SBL has never failed in any of their conferences, and this is one of them. And then chairman of the organizing community. This is indeed a wonderful one. Thank you so much. And then I am here on behalf of CWAG. CWAG is Center for Western Attorney Generals. It's a U.S. bipartisan group. It is made up of, it started with 15, from law officers from 15 states and 3 Pacific regions. And what are these law officers? What are they doing? They are attorney generals from the same state, and they have blossomed into attorney generals from over 36 states in the US. And they create forums, they create collaboration between the US and African countries, where they can share ideas, where we can indeed have opportunity to discuss, because we know that even as the trade is going beyond borders, crime, transnational crime also go beyond borders also. So we have people that have been members of CWAG in the past. Those are members of CWAG in the past. We have there Bill Clinton and other eminent US attorney generals in the US government. And they have continued, and from CWAG, they have now come into CWAG AAP, which is Africa Alliance Partnership. African Alliance Partnership, we work in strengthening law enforcement agencies. We work in strengthening law offices across Africa. we create forums during which we can share ideas. Because we know that if a state stays on itself and fights this crime, which are inimical to trade and an economy, it will not succeed. But by collaborating, the states are able to leverage on each other's expertise in those areas. Done a lot as CWAG AAP. We are in a lot of African countries. We work as collaborations, we share, we have seminars with different Ministry of Justice, and we also have information sharing and we exchange ideas. We also have conferences in America where we invite different attorney generals from different African states to come and share ideas on their experience in fighting crime. We all appreciate the fact that crimes is inimical to growth, is a bane to economy, to development. So indeed, as we work together, as we collaborate, we ensure that this is knobbed. And then we go on to, please, the next slide, please. We have done a lot of work in the area of anti-wildlife trafficking. We have also done a lot of work in combating human trafficking. We have done a lot of work in drug trafficking. We also done a lot in counterfeit drugs. In fact, I was in Accra last month where we had a convention with the FDA in Ghana on anti-drug counterfeiting measures. Sorry, that is so faint. Please, the next slide. And then there are a lot of areas of expertise. Remember, these are law officers from different states. And of course, there are different areas of expertise. And then, of course, we have more than 2,000 lawyers that are members and resources under CWAG. And of course, in the area of dispute resolution, we are key there. In areas of regulations, we are also key. And also in the area of enforcement. Please, the next slide. And then we have done a lot. These are things we aim to achieve with our trainings. These are things we aim to achieve with our seminar collaborations. Please, the next slide. I have just 10 minutes. And then, of course, you ask yourself, why do we want to fight transnational crimes together? Why is it important? Why won't Nigerian government stay on its own and do what we want to do? It's important that we fight it together because we find out that the crimes, that most of these crimes, it is hard that you see them originate in one country and conclude in one country. They pass through the borders. And once we are able to collaborate and jointly fight them, we are able to track them along the line, and we are able to stop them wherever they are. Please, the next slide. And then as CWAG, we strengthen this collaboration. We make sure that the work that the FDA is doing in Ghana, that the lessons learned in FDA Ghana, we also have it in NAFDAC. We ensure that the lesson we learn in fighting human trafficking in Nigeria, that is taken further beyond. Because one of the things that we have had a lot of trainings in Nigeria with NAPTIP, and one of the things we have done and we have learned from there, which prior to now most people don't know about it, is that if you have a house help and you are paying somebody else for your house help, you are actually involved in human trafficking. Most people didn't know that, but it was part of the training that the DJ made it known that it's actually running foul of the law, that you have a domestic help and then you are paying another person. So these are things that we learn and we foster in CWAG. We just want to be able to reach out and collaborate with every law enforcement agency, every regulator, all the influencers around the world, so that indeed we can build on our different strengths and our different strategies to ensure that we achieve our aim. Please, the next slide. We have done a lot of work in Egypt. We have done substantial work in Ghana, in Kenya, in Malawi. Is the next slide? Also in Rwanda, in South Africa, in Zambia, in Uganda. In Nigeria, we have partnered with a lot of organizations. We have partnered with Lagos Business School. We have partnered with the Cross River State Ministry of Justice. We have partnered with NAFPIP. We have partnered with Ogun State Judiciary and the Bar and Bench in Ogun State. In fact, we just finished a 2-day training workshop in Ogun State on Monday and Tuesday. Also in Nigeria, we have partnered with FISE, we have partnered with Kogi State, and we have partnered with different bars association in Nigeria. What are we doing just to ensure that the lessons learned in one state, that there are intergenerational lessons that move from one generation to the other, from one country to the other, so that together we are strengthened to do what we want to do. Next slide, please. These are the contacts for the Nigeria, for CWAG. And for Nigeria, the local partners for CWAG is Punuka Attorneys and Solicitors. My name is Ebele Chukweneda. I'm a partner in Punuka Attorneys and Solicitors. And if you want to know more about CWAG, you can go to the website, or we can talk immediately after now. But what we want to do is that we want to partner with the SBL, we want to partner with the MBA, we want to partner with different regulators and policymakers so that we are sure that the lessons that have been learned in other states are brought to bear in our nation, and it will help our enforcement abilities. Thank you so much. It is indeed an honor. Thank you.
Thank you, CWAG, for that presentation and for sponsorship of this event, as well as CLP Legal and TNP. We thank you so much. We assured you about 2 hours ago that this shall be no ordinary session. You will agree with me that we all leave here better equipped for practice as African practitioners, because the panel that we have here, international by nature, had taken us through the whole landscape of what it means to practice now and especially in the future for the advent of the African free continental trade agreement. Beyond that, they've touched on best practice, collaboration, the issues of the fact that there has to be a shift by the way we think, by the way we practice. So to appreciate our panel here, we call on Mr. Ayodele Akintunde, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, to do the honors on behalf of the section of the business law. We start with the chairman of the session. He likes to be called Mr. J. Thank you for ably chairing and making the session so much interactive. Next, we want to appreciate Mr. Chike Obianwu, a partner at 10 Plus. Thank you very much. We call on Mr. Ian Alex for traveling all the way from London to be with us to share his perspective. I will call on Toyin Ojo for your deep insight into what it means to Next, we have Mr. Wole Obayomi from KPMG. Thank you very much. Last but not the least is Kimathi. You went last. No, his son is coming. Mr. David, Mr. Kimathi is not here, so you collect on his behalf. Thank you, Mr. Guy, for that brilliant lecture. It took us around what it means to practice in the Africa, especially from the globalized perspective. Thank you very much. Mr. Kimathi is not here, but will take his own. We thank him also. Thank you, Mr. Ajibade, Senior Advocate. Akintunde, yes. Okay, he wants to make a small speech.
Ladies and gentlemen, can we please give the panelists another round of applause? It's been a very, very enriching session. Yesterday, we all must have heard of the news of a fire incident in Lagos where a tanker spilled and it resulted in a loss of over 9 lives and a lot of injured people. And there was quite a substantial amount of destruction of property. Also, in the last few days, we have all heard of the disturbing news of deaths as a result of clashes between herdsmen and farmers. I want to seek your indulgence as a body in this session for us to rise up for just a minute of silence for the souls of the departed. There's so much bloodshed in the land, and there's so much loss of life. We are beginning to wonder whether life really has much value in our society. So a minute of silence, please. May God Almighty grant the soul of the departed peace and eternal rest in the mighty name of Jesus.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. After now, there will be tea break. The tea break is sponsored by Control Rigs. Yes, but please, everybody should remain seated after the photo session. While the next session starts by 11:45. So once we leave for the tea break, we'll pick our things and hurry back to the sessions. Exactly by 11:45, the other sessions. Section 6A is in the marquee outside. That's a standardization of continental regulation on consumer protection competition law. While Section B is here in the Congress Hall, enabling e-commerce across African continent. Thank you. Thank you very much. Hello, please, everybody mind your bags and your valuables. Please pick up every item you came with. Thank you.